President Trump and Republicans are celebrating a major legislative victory on tax reform. House Speaker Paul Ryan just wrapped up a ceremony to mark the bill's passage before giving the final copy signed and sealed and delivered to President Trump for his signature. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business, Melissa Francis, the editor of townhall.com, Katie Pavlich, former national security staffer under Presidents Bush and Obama, Jillian Turner, and on the couch today, Fox and Friends weekend co-host Pete Hegseth is here. He's outnumbered. A salute.
Yes.
That means a lot.
Wow.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
To America and to you.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. It's your
It's good to be
trademark.
here. Why not? Yeah.
And it's real from you. You're a veteran. When we do it, it's just, civilians rolling.
We're
with
just
love.
having fun.
Which means I shouldn't do it because I know when to properly do it.
Now I've drawn too much attention
right,
to a
yeah, we've done
fabulous
too much.
thing.
Maybe it's a
Good to have
violation.
you.
It's true. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's go. President Trump and the GOP are celebrating that major legislative victory on tax cuts and jobs creation. The president thanking Republicans yesterday at the White House for passing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now they're working on selling it to the American people. The Washington Post is reporting it talked to dozens of GOP operatives who say the numbers are so bad right now, things can only get better. They tell the Post Republicans are planning ad campaigns to drive home their message that they are the party to cut taxes. President Trump is already building up that momentum. Watch.
We broke every record. It's the largest, I always say the most massive, but it's the largest tax cut in the history of our country. And reform, but tax cut. It's always a lot of fun when you win. If you work hard and lose, that's not acceptable. We haven't even been a year. And we did the largest tax cut in our history. And we can say Merry Christmas again. People are saying Merry Christmas again, and we like the sound.
A number of large companies are announcing that once President Trump signs the bill into law, they'll be giving more to their employees, including bonuses and higher pay. Some of those companies include Boeing, Comcast, AT&T, Fifth Third Bancorp, and Wells Fargo. President Trump tweeted this: the massive tax cuts, which the fake news media is desperate to write badly about, so as to please their Democrat bosses, will soon be kicking in and will speak for themselves. Companies are already making big payments to workers. Dems want to raise taxes. Hate these big cuts! Exclamation point. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland is responding to the announcement about bonuses from AT&T. Watch.
They are doing it as a PR stunt because the question will be, these are some one-time bonuses. Sounds very nice, but that was not what was promised. What was promised was a $4,000 a year pay increase into the base. We know trickle-down economics doesn't work. Millions and millions of middle-class Americans will see a tax increase in the coming year, and that's to pay for this gigantic corporate tax cut.
So I'm a little confused. There's a lot of work to be done across America, not just among Republican voters, but Democrat voters too, to try to get the word out about this. Why sell it after the fact?
Well, I think there's been so much misinformation in the process.
So why not
being rolled
combat
out.
that with
Well, I think they've tried to, but
Okay.
I think when the president uses the term fake news media, people want to roll their eyes. But the reality is the media is in cahoots with the Democrats. They want to make this plan look bad because they want to defeat this president. It will succeed on its own merits. If people feel like this bill has empowered them, if they see money back into their wallets, if they see jobs come back that they didn't have before, or companies stay, or bonuses come out. By the way, Willie Geist, Rachel Maddow, you're welcome for your bonus. Comcast owns MSNBC.
Yeah, so they'll be
You're
getting
welcome.
that.
They'll get a bonus. I mean, when money is given out and people are generous, that's a good thing. It's the economy, stupid. And so if President Trump can run in 2020 on are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, and this tax bill is part of doing so, then it doesn't need to be sold. But of course, it's been impugned by the left because that's what they want to do to this president.
Yeah, and when you say media, you mean some media, because we're part of the media
Not
too.
all media.
Not all. Katie?
Well, they have to remind people that it was Republicans who passed this, and let's not forget that this is coming right before the 2018 midterm. So it's not only just about reselling the plan that has had a lot of bad misinformation, and it's true that according to polling that we cited, we don't know the details of the questions, but people don't necessarily know or think it's going to benefit them. That will change once they see their paychecks come in when this goes into effect. But this is also about the politics and PR surrounding an election next year, and reminding people as Democrats try to take advantage of the economy improving that it was Republicans who put this in place.
You know, I just had another thought as you were talking. What are they fighting about right now? The spending legislation. They got to go in and come up with a budget and keep the government open, so on and so forth. It doesn't hurt to demonstrate to the other side the power that you have.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that in the end, though, I don't know how much that matters in terms of it's the voters that matter. And it's what's in your wallet is how you end up feeling about this whole thing. And they can't make you feel better about it if you have less money. And you're going to feel better if you have more money. There's no disputing that. You look at the companies that were listed at the top. One of them was Wells Fargo. I remember talking to Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan not too long ago when he was saying, you know, it's hard to keep a good teller. This is a high skilled position. Somebody's got it. They're responsible. They're there. You can count on them. I have to pay them more and more. When you see a company like Wells Fargo saying, I'm going to put this money back out there in terms of wages, I know for sure that's true because I know I've talked to the CEOs who say they have to do that in order to keep people working. On top of that, you get a tax cut. When people have more money, Republicans won't need to sell anything.
Yeah.
Jillian?
I agree. And I think on Katie's point about the political aspect of this, if the economy in 2018 doesn't tank, as many Democrats are predicting, they're going to have very little to run on in the midterms in 2018, aside from just sort of emotional opposition to the president. So I think that's where this, like, the proof is in the pudding thing comes into play. Voters will either have that money in their bank accounts, which is very difficult to run against, or they won't.
It's very true. I think Obamacare in 2009 is a perfect example of this. Think about how that was wrapped and sold, and what was said from the bully pulpit from President Obama about how great it was going to be for everybody, what it was going to do for you.
People felt it and said,
they
don't
felt,
like it.
Then they actually had to deal with it.
Right.
And it cost them the 2010, the 2012, and the 2014 election. Ultimately, frankly, 2016.
And it's very, no matter what,
it really
it's very,
matters what actually happens.
It's very difficult to convince people that money in their bank accounts is a bad thing. As some Democrats are, no matter
Almost
what.
impossible.
Making their own choice
Don't
is a
miss
bad
the
thing.
underlying point of all this just with that one bill, because those things will sunset and actually the corporate taxes won't. So that is part of the rhetoric that's out there from the left that's actually true. And if they push that hard enough, people will get hooked on that extra money in their paychecks, which, I mean, come on, who doesn't? It's our money. And then you know that there's a sunset clause that's coming. And you know it got talked about even within days of this being voted on, that they might even shorten the time period that those families' tax cuts stay in place. So those are legitimate criticisms, but now Republicans can say, but wait till February, and you will see.
But my understanding is that the reason why there's a sunset on the families, maybe Melissa can explain more of this, rather than the corporations, is due to the Senate rules and the way the votes work and the vote tally.
The Republicans should definitely say that too, because most people won't know that.
Right, sure. But the thing is there's nothing preventing Republicans from, and Democrats, quite frankly, from coming back when that sunset clause goes into place and saying, let's keep the tax cuts that we have. And if Republicans get more seats eventually, they can make them permanent. And so that is one thing. The other thing, too, is this poo-pooing and degrading with, you know, Senator Chris Van Hollen saying things like, and the left is on this talking point, it's just $1,000 bonus. It's just $800 more dollars. It's just $400 more dollars. Tell that to any person who is living paycheck to paycheck. Any family that's trying to put their kids through college, trying to buy, you know, Christmas gifts, braces, health insurance, any kind of thing. For them to act like any kind of money that they get to keep is a bad thing or it's not enough really is pretty insulting.
Well,
and I don't think that's going to work very well for them.
The talking point that's working really well on the Republican side right now is when you see that extra money in your paycheck, ask yourself, is that my money or is that the government's money? Because the Democrats are the party of send your money to us. We know how to spend it better than you do. I've heard Republicans come out. It's the first time in a long time that they've been unified on message. And that is one that I think really resonates with people.
Well, there's a trade-off, though, just to push back a little. I mean, I agree with you. $1,000 is a lot of money in today's economy to pretty much every American. However, it's about the trade-off. So Democrats will make the argument that, yes, maybe you have $1,000 in your bank account, but look around you. What do the public schools in your district look like? What is infrastructure? What do the roads and bridges and tunnels look like? What do the public parks look like? How's your public transportation? And so people will have to make that calculation for themselves and their families.
But
that's
they never think that
so
way.
far,
I think it's that they're saying $1,000 is.
But the federal government is taking in more money today than it ever has. And people have been looking around and they're going, what is my money actually buying me? And they look at the way their money's been spent and they go, yeah, I actually think that I can spend
that's what we
money
see in
better.
New York City. Our
Let me ask
taxes
you
are
about
so high
this.
and the city's a mess.
One of the things that
Yes,
Democrats were slow to learn, you mentioned all those years where they shed that some 1,000 seats in state and Capitol Hill seats. But, you know, one of the things they missed was that early on push against Obamacare once people figured out how it really was going to ride and die in their lives, if you will. I mean, it became a burden for them. Once we saw that in the polling, Democrats were not quick to pick up on that. Republicans are not waiting. They see that there's some consternation, some concern out there in America, and they want to hit that early. How important is that?
I think it's very, very important because once you get a narrative established, it's really tough to pull it back. And I also think that Paul Ryan, you saw Mitch McConnell, that was his excited face, by the way, at the press conference. This is the Mitch McConnell.
Wait, can we show it?
No, his impression is so good. You don't need the actual video. It's perfect.
But when you believe that it will actually stimulate the economy, then you can stand behind it.
All right, we want to break in with breaking news. I know you guys have been watching me multitask behind the scenes here. Last speaker at the United Nations is up at the lectern right now. Let me just tell you what's happening right now. The United Nations is getting ready to vote, and basically it's a vote of repudiation against President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and the voting is beginning. Our ambassador, Nikki Haley, had said in recent days the General Assembly is considering a resolution about the president's recent decision on Jerusalem. As you consider your vote, I want you to know that the president and U.S. take the vote very personally. I don't know how much people know about this, but this has been a very strong reaction to the UN members saying to the United States, we don't appreciate your take on it. The president's kind of intimating that, well, you know, we put a lot of money behind our support of the United Nations. And take a real good look at the people who vote against us today. He doubled down on that language through Nikki Haley, and then yesterday in his cabinet meeting said, I support what Nikki Haley and I worked on. He called her Nikki, what we worked on in terms of that language and pushback. Pete, you have a thought.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me if the United States of America gets to choose where we place our embassy. No world body should be able to tell us otherwise. And unfortunately, to be blunt, the UN has become an anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic, anti-American cesspool. And so they will use that body to condemn the West, to condemn us at any turn possible. President Trump made a very bold move in that declaration to move our capital to Jerusalem. It's a recognition of facts on the ground. It's standing by an ally. Now this is the world reacting to America first, and they're doing it through this vote.
So in Haley's comment, she said the U.S. announcement is an acknowledgement that peace is best advanced, not set back, when all parties are honest with each other about the basic facts. Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel since the country's founding nearly 70 years ago. The president's honest assessment of this reality does not foreclose any of the options considered by Israelis and Palestinians for decades, for peace in particular. Jillian, what's happening today? What does this vote mean?
So I think that this is, as Pete said, the member countries pushing back against the United States decision. Personally, on this issue, I tend to agree with former Ambassador Dennis Ross, who said this is really a recognition of reality. I suspect that in the long term, history will prove this is the right decision to make, not just for the United States, but for many other countries as well.
Our decision.
The problem with, not the problem, but where I would push back is on Nikki Haley when she makes comments about we're watching how you vote and sort of a very thinly veiled threat to retaliate against countries that don't vote the way we want them to. There's a risk there. I'm not saying she's not allowed to do that. I'm not saying that she is in the wrong for doing that. I'm simply in saying that with a...
What is the risk?
The risk is that the United Nations has always been something... The United Nations for the United States has always been a vehicle through which we exert our influence around the world. As have all the international organizations.
Let me just finish my point. It's not the only way we do it.
Okay. That is right. I was saying before I was interrupted that that's why we have international organizations, and the United States has always been a very active participant in them.
All right, I'm going to step in. The results were just on the screen a second ago, and we were talking through them, but you saw, and I don't know if we can pop those back up.
Yep, we can see that again.
35 is what I caught.
There were people who abstained as well.
128.
There we go. 9 against.
Okay, there we go. 9 against. And so what this means is that, you know, when America makes a decision, when our president makes a decision, and he mentioned that he and the Ambassador Haley had worked out the kind of language that she was going to be using. So she's got the power of the president.
Yeah.
and the bully pulpit of the White House behind her. But, you know, when you talk about money, Melissa, and how much we spend in our support militarily and in other ways for the UN, there is some power there. Is there this risk? Do you see this risk that Jillian's talking about?
I think it would be there over time, but right now we've gone so far in the other direction of being a pushover for so long that we have a lot of distance to go before it gets to that point. I think that what she said before was, you know, you guys come to us a lot for favors, for influence, and you're kind of always crying on our doorstep, and we step in
We're the only ones that ever enforce your resolutions.
We come in, we step in, and we help out. And we do that because we recognize that that is part of our responsibility. It is in our best interest, as you said a lot of times, but it's also part of our responsibility as neighbors and this and that. And she goes, this vote actually means nothing because we're going to do it. All you're doing is choosing to publicly slap us in the face for doing it, and we don't appreciate that. When we're out there helping everybody else, we've made a decision, we're doing it, and you're choosing to publicly stand up and slap us, and we don't like that.
I don't want everybody to miss it. So when we say 128 countries have voted yes to this, and that this is a resolution condemning our decision that we have a right to make through our president, who we want to recognize, as you said, having a capital, where we want to put our U.S. embassies. And by the way, unanimous vote in Congress just 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Just because other presidents haven't walked out what Congress and the American people have wanted for decades doesn't mean that this changes the game in any other way. Like, it's not like the president went rogue on this issue.
Right.
He's in full concert, unanimous concert with what we've said as a nation through our elected leaders, that this is what we want. So now we see it. 128 nations have said, we're wrong about this. Here's what Ambassador Nikki Haley had to say just before the vote.
America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that. But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered.
Amen.
Yeah, good for her. I mean, the UN maybe should take a look at what the risk is to them to continue to slam the United States when it's not just even about the funding. We give the UN $8 billion a year, which is more funding than all of the other countries combined. We are the ones in the world who actually promote peace rather than the UN. They're the ones who are using American taxpayer money as UN peacekeepers are engaged in sexual scandals around the world, taking advantage of the people they are supposed to be protecting. And the issue that I come up with, too, is the things that they choose to condemn are always mind-blowing. They always act like the Israeli-Palestinian problem is the biggest problem in the Middle East. Well, what about the hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed in Syria? What about the genocides that continue to go on in Iraq against Christians and minorities there? What about the things that are happening in Africa today that the UN is standing by and doing nothing about because they're too busy condemning the United States and Israel, which have been two of the good forces in the UN. So maybe they should take the risk.
Katie, it sounds like you're advocating for reform. Not that we renege on the UN or that we throw it out, which I think some of the more hardcore
but I think the reform comes in the form of
like Pete,
just quickly ask in terms of this. We've gotten some news on Hezbollah in recent days. And you know, the UN gets the badge of pro-Palestinian from its critics. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's actually more anti-Israeli than anything else. My thoughts are, it was a good idea for all the right reasons after the world went to war twice. So let's talk about it before we break out the guns. That's the prospect of the UN. And we do have, as a permanent member of the Security Council, a veto power, which we exercised in this case, actually. So we do have a lot of influence. It used to serve our influence. Now the UN is used as a bludgeon against us by smaller countries that get to gang up on us to be anti-American and vote against us. They love to pass resolutions sanctimoniously to feel good about themselves in the international press, but they never enforce them. A piece of paper means nothing. It is ultimately the U.S. military that is the full faith and credit of security in this world. So why should we ever submit to this kind of body? This is yet another example, and God bless what President Trump and Nikki Haley have done in this.
Inside the United Nations, in just the last couple of minutes, you saw it here live on Fox News Channel, Outnumbered. At the United Nations, 128 countries said yes to a resolution condemning the United States' decision to recognize Israel's capital as Jerusalem and to eventually move our U.S. embassy there from Tel Aviv. That is how this shook out. 9 no's on that resolution, which basically says they're with us, and 35 abstentions. I just want to give you that vote breakdown. Marinate on that a bit. We will be right back. Keep watching.
Two big names are likely to be grilled by Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill today. Bruce Orr is expected to testify behind closed doors in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Orr was demoted from his post at the DOJ after it was revealed he had meetings with officials from Fusion GPS. That is the firm behind the unverified anti-Trump dossier. And FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe is appearing before the House Judiciary Committee. He fielded questions from another House panel for at least 7 hours on Tuesday regarding Republicans' concerns of left-leaning political bias within the agency. Doug McKelway is live in Washington with the details. A lot to cover there, Doug.
Yeah, Melissa, and we know that FBI Director Andrew McCabe was seen entering a secure room for another day of questioning by that House committee. Recall that it was McCabe who oversaw the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. That, while his wife was running for office in Virginia and had accepted nearly $500,000 from a Hillary Clinton-linked campaign group. Sources tell Fox News that in testimony yesterday, McCabe could not recall when he learned that the Clinton campaign and the DNC had paid for that notorious Trump dossier commissioned by the Oppo research firm Fusion GPS. Also set to testify today before the Senate Intelligence Committee, as you mentioned, is Bruce Orr, the Deputy Attorney General who was demoted after Fox News revealed that he had had secret meetings with two Fusion GPS operatives, Glenn Simpson and the former British spy who did much of the legwork on the dossier, Christopher Steele. Fox also revealed that Orr's wife, Nellie, an expert in Russian affairs, was hired by Fusion GPS and worked during the summer and fall of 2016 on the Trump project. A lot of the Intelligence Committee's interest appears to stem from text messages that FBI official Peter Strzok exchanged with his mistress. That one text in particular, which has raised so many questions, was again referenced. I'll read it to you right now again. I want to believe that the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, meaning Trump, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before 40. Well, last night, Martha McCallum asked Intelligence Committee member Peter King whether McCabe was asked if he was the Andy referenced in that email.
Did he confirm yesterday that Andy's office is his office?
Again, I was not there when he confirmed it. I think he did, but again, I can't be certain on that. I just know that he did not adequately answer any of those type of questions.
This morning on America's Newsroom, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders reiterated the president's statement that he has no intention of firing Robert Mueller. She said, quote, "We look forward to seeing this hoax," her words, hoax, wrapped up. Back to you, Melissa.
Doug, thank you so much for that. Katie, what do you think is the biggest piece to this story? Is it the meeting with Bruce Orr getting, he was demoted over the fact that he went out and he met with this British spy who put together this fake smear campaign paid for by the Democrats, and he met with them afterwards. You would think to mine whatever information might be in there and use it to spy on the other campaign. I mean, it just seems...
There, I think, are a few big pieces. It's hard to point to just one. I think there are serious questions about the meeting that allegedly took place in Andrew McCabe's official office and why FBI agents on official government time were somehow conspiring for an insurance policy and what that insurance policy actually meant. We have some allegations of what that may have been through reporting at the Wall Street Journal, that it was the Russian investigation. And if that is true, then that is using an official law enforcement agency to go after a presidential candidate. But there are serious questions, too, about why is it that the DOJ was so intricately linked with a dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign, and was it used, again, to go to the FISA court to get warrants to spy on people, American citizens, who are working on the Trump transition team? Those are two of the biggest questions.
Don't forget, the dossier was first funded actually by Never Trumpers. Never Trumpers and then Democrats.
But Republicans.
You can't. The beginning of the research started there against Donald Trump.
But
the dossier is different. You're totally right.
You have to make a clear distinction between
But at the same thing, this is a bureaucratic conspiracy. This is what it is starting to look like. You've got folks in government before the election, but the troubling part is Bruce Orr met with them after the election. Why? After the dossier would have been deeply discredited. But if you'd done any research into whether it's valid or not, it's because it was some believe, an insurance policy,
Right.
as Peter Strzok talked about in the text message with Lisa Page.
To go ahead and use it to get FISA warrants, to spy,
weaponize
to get
against the
anything you can
incoming president, to impugn his credibility, which is exactly what they've done for the last year.
Jillian, then, because this appears to be the extension of what everybody feared with when you start listening in on phone conversations and you start getting FISA warrants. Like, in the long run, could the government use it for their own political purpose? And at a time like 9/11, when we're so concerned about keeping everyone safe, they say, but wait, and long off in the future, someone could use this to spy on their opponent. We all go, who cares? We want to be safe for now. Is that coming true, maybe?
Well, just a quick note on it. It's funny what you just said, because I started shaking my head. I thought you were going to say this feeds into people's worst fears about the deep state narrative, which is something I have really tried to push back on a lot. But this series of events has left me feeling very skeptical and very alarmed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. To be honest, the series of text messages in particular, I feel like the intelligence community does have a right to their own personal opinions, but they have an obligation to keep those opinions private and out of the workplace and completely out of a discussion with their colleagues on a daily basis. And so this has really alarmed me.
I know we got to go real quick. Can I just make one comment? You know, my big question has been, what is the end game if we find bias at the FBI? And I think we need to have a really good conversation about that. Our leaders hopefully will let us know what that looks like, because all of this is just exercise then. There's got to be some sort of, because if there's bias at the FBI and it's demonstrative and it's in the bloodstream, how do we fix it?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Now that tax reform is behind them, lawmakers are hoping to keep the government funded and avert a shutdown. Whether they'll be able to pass a spending bill in time, and the political fallout if they don't. Plus, new details on the stunning amount paid out in congressional sexual harassment lawsuits. All on your dime, the taxpayer. Now lawmakers are pressing for more transparency, whether the culture will change.
Let's come in now with this Fox News alert. President Trump and Republicans may have delivered on tax reform just days before their Christmas deadline. Now, though, they have to face a government shutdown looming tomorrow at midnight. House Republicans appear to be closing in on a stopgap measure, which keeps the government funded through January 19th, paving the way for lawmakers to punt most of their to-do list into the new year, especially battles over the budget and immigration. When was the last time we had a budget?
I can't. 8 years. I think we weren't
8 years, Harris.
born. I don't know.
All right. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate is ready to take up whatever funding bill the House sends it. But Democrats like Nancy Pelosi continue to push for including protections for dreamers, immigrants brought here illegally as children. Watch.
We have problems with this bill. We do see it as an opportunity for them to at least allow a vote. At least allow a vote on dreamers, which we think we would win. But hopefully we've made some progress in their thinking that as to the urgency of it.
Let's go to Peter Ducey, live from the Hill with the latest. Peter, always good to see you. Bring us up to speed.
Harris, Republicans aren't counting on any Democratic support in the House or the Senate. So within their own ranks right now, they're trying to work on this temporary budget that would keep current spending levels right where they are for another couple of weeks. Included in their plan, a reauthorization of that program that lets law enforcement spy on people in the states, the FISA Section 702, and an extension of the Children's Health Insurance Program.
Unfortunately, our Democratic colleagues are unwilling to make that commitment to American families. Thus far, they have opposed all of our efforts to include 5 years of CHIP funding in this week's agreement.
Something else on the table today, a separate $81 billion worth of government assistance for victims of this year's hurricanes, floods, and wildfires. Democratic leadership says they don't really care for this supplemental disaster funding, but it doesn't sound like they'll stand in Republicans' way as long as DACA comes up next month and lawmakers start talking about legal solutions for people brought to this country illegally as kids.
This is an issue we have a moral imperative to solve here in Congress. So, Democrats want to make sure that we have equal bargaining, and we're not going to allow things like disaster relief go forward without discussing some of the other issues we care about that I've mentioned.
We still haven't seen the official legislation, the official resolution, so the vote on the floor and the debate on the floor still has not started yet, but there is great urgency to get it rolling on the House side, where these things must originate because they have to finish it there and in the Senate by midnight tomorrow. Harris.
Peter Ducey, thank you very much. You know, I often take notes on what Peter tells me. When I see that Melissa Francis is taking notes, I want to go to her first.
Scribbling. I mean, I think it makes the American people so furious. It makes me so mad to see these jackasses tied up in knots over problems they have created.
Wow.
It's cable. I think we can say that. They're donkeys. They are tied up in knots. And I mean Republicans, too. They write these laws, they careen towards these cliffs, and then they stand over them like they're dying. Chuck Schumer talking about disaster relief. Fox Business's Adam Shapiro is pointing out there are cotton giveaways in this disaster relief. I mean, it is all such nonsense. It is so created by them on purpose, and then they act like our hands are tied. They treat us like we're stupid, right? And it's so frustrating.
I was going to say something, but she said it all.
Right, I
well
know.
Said.
Amen. Well name calling. It was interesting.
No, it's so true. I mean, ultimately, you've got you want to look at the comparison of Republicans and Democrats in the next election cycle. If Republicans are going to come to you and say, we cut your taxes, and we're building you a border wall, and we're going to end chain migration, and the Democrats are going to say, we got one big accomplishment. It's keeping people that are here illegally still here. And listen, I get that Dreamers didn't come here of their own volition. That's fine and fair. So I think it's a very good trade for this president to make. But it is such a demonstration of priorities between these two parties. It is Americans first or Dreamers first. And I think voters are going to see that.
That is a very fair point. You're pitting people against each other. And nowhere in there is this idea that this policy is going away, because it was never intended to last forever.
Correct.
Like, it's broken as it is.
But don't you think, Pete, that, I mean, okay, Republican-controlled Congress, both chambers, Republican-controlled executive, don't you think the blame in 2018, if there is a government shutdown, is going to go optics-wise squarely on the shoulders of Republicans? How are they going to pass that off on the Democrats?
The president has done a great job defining the Democrats as obstructionists, which is exactly what they are. We didn't get one single vote for tax reform, for cutting your taxes from Democrats. They are resisting this president from the inauguration till today. So why would any voter go, well, yeah, of course the government is shut down because of Republicans? Well, they're getting no cooperation
Everybody
whatsoever.
Looks bad on this.
Even on,
I just think, I
even
don't
on
know.
common sense
I hate
stuff.
the word optics, but I think the optics are going to land with the Republicans. It's their government.
They all look bad.
They all
What did you say, Katie?
So not when Trump in charge. He's better at messaging than Republicans are, and he's been beating the drum against Democrats for 3 weeks on the spending issue.
The obstructionist as well has been going on since he got into office. So, all right, we'll move on. A new report that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is ordering prosecutors to take a fresh look at the Russian Uranium One deal that allegedly benefited the Clintons. Could they find a need for a special prosecutor in all of this? And will anybody be held accountable?
News reporting that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has ordered DOJ prosecutors to begin asking FBI agents to explain evidence they found in a previous criminal investigation into the Obama-era Russia Uranium One deal. That deal allegedly benefited Bill and Hillary Clinton to the tune of millions in donations to their foundation. The move reportedly an effort to fulfill a promise made by a DOJ official to Congress last month to examine whether a special counsel is needed to look into the deal. Melissa, we keep hearing about special counsel needed for this, for that. How much investigation is too much? Not saying it is, but...
You know, I mean, it seems like there's no end game when you have the investigation, so it's so incredibly frustrating. I think with this one, it's one of those issues that we keep seeing where, do you know what's in someone's heart when it looks like a quid pro quo? You see someone give money to someone else and then they decide something or vote for something or push for something that's favorable to that first person. The person who, you know, seems to be guilty could say, well, I was going to vote that way anyway. And that's why we do things when you say you can't do this, because even the appearance of impropriety is wrong. You'll never have that smoking gun where somebody says, if I give you this money, will you guarantee me that you will help shove this deal through? And the other person says yes in the email. You never have the smoking gun. but you feel like you know it's there. And I think with this one, it's really egregious, and it's so obviously it never made any sense to give uranium to Russia ever for any reason ever. If you just start there, it's so obvious.
Jillian, what about the national security implications of this? Because that's been, what people say, well, it's one thing if the Clintons were getting rich off of donations, fine. But the uranium issue is a whole other issue, considering it has to do with U.S. national security.
So when this story first broke, my first thought was, well, aren't there some major national security implications?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that Vladimir Putin does best is use control of energy strategically to wield power across large swathes of Europe, right?
Yeah.
So whether, there was debate about whether we were giving the Russian-backed companies access to 20% or 15% or 10% of U.S. uranium supply, and I was thinking,
well, how about zero?
How about zero? Right? But I've actually come to see this issue differently. To answer your question directly, I now feel that, in a weird sense, the national security issue is not as bad as the optics of, they're using that word again. I don't want to use that word.
Phil's going to ban that word on the
the risk
later.
of on the surface, this looking like quid pro quo, and potentially corruption. I think that's actually more dangerous for the country than the Russians having access to uranium.
That puts out the
supplies.
idea that we do these kinds of deals, and hey, if you did one, why can't you do more? I guess from a journalism standpoint, when you say the word Russia now, it evokes all sorts of things among people in America. And I think it's disingenuous to think that Americans aren't talking about this, but those whom I've talked to talk about it this way. Are they ever going to get to the bottom of anything?
Right. Yeah.
And so here's the deal. If it has Russia in it, let's just look at all of it. The Clintons, all of it. We've already spent millions of dollars trying to figure out what we already know is no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign team and Russia. But evidence perhaps of meddling in our elections. So why not look at all of it? Let's see what was happening with the Clintons.
And in my mind, you can get to the bottom of it without another special counsel. We have an entire federal bureau of investigations, even if it's been politicized.
Yeah, exactly. Well, moving right along, staggering new numbers revealing just how much Congress has paid in sexual harassment suits over the past decade. We'll look at the dollars and cents and whether they could spark real reform.